Those familiar with the actions of Ammon Bundy and the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom are well aware that what drew them to the state of Oregon was the diabolical action of the U.S. government to send ranchers Dwight Hammond and his son Stephen to prison, not once, but twice, for the same alleged crime. The Hammonds used backfires on their properties to burn off excess foliage as a deterrent against the potential for mass wildfires. This is a practice used not only by most of the ranchers, but by the government itself to try and protect the wildlands. We've all seen the video footage of Bureau of Land Management agents starting backfires that got out of control and scorched thousands of acres of land, burning down homes and properties of some of the ranchers in the area. The government brought no charges against these BLM agents. Yet when the fires started by the Hammonds spread onto 100 acres of government-owned land, destroying nothing but actually causing improvements to the property value, the government used this as an opportunity to finally defeat the Hammonds. The government had been fighting the Hammonds in court for years to try and take their ranch lands away from them. The backfire lit by the Hammonds gave the government the excuse to charge them as domestic terrorists who had committed acts of arson against the U.S. government. The mandatory minimum sentence for such acts of terrorism is 5 years in prison. But the judge overseeing the case said that this punishment violated the U.S. Constitution's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Because 5 years in prison was so unjust, the judge sentenced Dwight to less than a year in prison and approximately 1 year for Stephen Hammond. But after the men fully served their sentences, the government let them get back into their own lives and acclimate back into their work routines at home, and they waited until just 1 week before the statute of limitations was to run out, and they took the Hammonds back to court again, demanding that they be returned to prison to complete a full minimum of 5 years. This outrageous abuse by the government is what led to the protest by Ammon and his associates from all across America. During the Malheur Wildlife Refuge occupation, the Hammonds remained largely silent, prompting throngs of far-left, mostly sexual deviants from the radical gay rights movement to savage the protesters in social media, claiming that not even the Hammonds supported them. But those of us familiar with the situation knew the truth. The federal government had threatened the Hammonds to remain silent and not show any support for Ammon and the others, or they would transfer the elderly Dwight Hammond to a different prison with inadequate medical facilities. The threat effectively meant a death sentence for Dwight Hammond, who suffers from significant health problems. But today in court, attorneys for Ammon Bundy presented a signed affidavit from the Hammond family that they have, in fact, remained silent because of threats by the federal government. Let me read some of this statement to you by Rusty Hammond. He is another son of Dwight Hammond and brother to Stephen. I am an adult over the age of 18. I am a resident of Lake County, Oregon. I am of sound mind and am competent to testify. I am the son of Dwight Hammond and the brother of Stephen Hammond. I have met and know Ammon Bundy. Mr. Bundy and I initially met on December 15, 2015 in Burns, Harney County, Oregon. I also met with Ammon Bundy at the rally and parade in Burns, Oregon on January 2, 2016. I also met with Ammon Bundy on multiple occasions at my mother's home, meaning the home of Dwight and Susan Hammond, between January 3rd of 2016 and January 24th. I have an understanding from my meetings and conversations with Mr. Ammon Bundy as to why Mr. Bundy was in Burns and Harney County, and due to my direct communication with him, Mr. Bundy's actions in Harney County were to bring attention to my father's and brother's case and subsequent incarceration, and to bring attention to a much larger issue of unconstitutional federal overreach. My family has been threatened by the government for our associations with Mr. Ammon Bundy. I have communicated to Mr. Bundy that my family has been threatened to stay away from him. I, Rusty Hammond, declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. God bless Ammon and Ryan Bundy and the other men and women who traveled to Oregon to stand up for the rights of Dwight and Stephen Hammond, And shame on the cowards in the Bureau of Land Management for their despicable assault on the Hammond family. And even more shame on the Harney County Sheriff's Department, especially the yellow-bellied Dave Ward, who refused to do his duty as the highest law enforcement official in the county to take a stand for the defense of his constituents. For other bombshell revelations in the Oregon standoff trial, make sure to subscribe to this channel at www.youtube.com/prepare333. For the End Times News Report, this is Jake Morphonios.